Welcome to the Teamwork Advantage podcast with Greg Gregory. Join us as Greg interviews powerful thought leaders and successful team and leadership experts from across the country on teamwork, leadership, and organizational culture. Now let's check in for this week's episode.
Welcome back to the Teamwork Advantage, a podcast that is dedicated to the growth, development, and advancement of teamwork, leadership, and culture. Hi, my name is Greg Gregory, and we're glad you're joining us each week to listen to thought leaders from across the country and around the world. We are now downloaded in over 59 countries, and we're excited to have that growth. The messages I'm getting from people are just outstanding about some of the interviews we're doing, about how it's helping in areas at work, in their personal lives, in their volunteer lives. It's so helpful on so many different levels. And today, I think we're going to find a lot of the same coming through. Joining us from the San Francisco Bay Area today, we're fortunate to have Genefa Murphy with us, and she is the Chief Marketing Officer for Five9. Now, she has over 15 years of global experience in the field of technology, ranging from consulting to product management, strategy, marketing. She's also an accomplished leader and has led worldwide teams, and that's critical. It's worldwide, so we're understanding the differences in different cultures, in creating and executing compelling and effective go-to-market strategies. Now, that may sound like a lot for somebody who's sitting in her office right now going, what is a go-to-market strategy? She'll break that down for us in our chat today. She's also a passionate business executive with experience in various IT domains, which I want to know about those various domains. She's always a technology enthusiast, something I am not. She's consistently looks for new opportunities to break the mold and push the boundaries to lift her teams to the next level. Exemplified by a proven track record ranging from execution of global product releases to building go-to-market strategies for both incubation solutions and established product lines. She knows how to get things out there and get them working. So if that's where your organization is, that's powerful. If it's not, the ideas about what she's going to share about your teams will be incredibly helpful. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Business IT and a PhD, which is focused on, and this I find fascinating, Genefa, I want to know about this, the intersection of technology and sociology in determining technology adoption in the enterprise. She's been recognized as a Global CMO of the Year and a CRN Woman of the Channel for her contributions to the partner and channel ecosystem. Genefa, welcome. Greetings from the East Coast. You're on the West Coast. How are you today?
Greetings from the West Coast. Hello, I'm good. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for having me.
We're excited about this. And I'm so excited to hear about Five9 a little bit. And there's things I want to learn about you, but you didn't wake up, I don't know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right out of high school or college. You did not wake up saying, you know, I'm going to be a CMO of the year.
No, not at all. Not in any way, shape, or form. It was a varied path to getting to be a CMO, and as you talked about, I've held various roles. I started essentially as a researcher when I was doing my PhD. I did that in industry so that it wasn't just something hypothetical. I went from researcher to consultant to product manager to marketer, and then from various types of marketing into CMO. And when I think about CMO, my roles in CMO have been broad and narrower, but they essentially fall into three things: method, message, and making it work.
I like that. So 3 M's.
3 M's.
Mm-hmm. So how long have you been involved with Five9?
I've been at Five9 for just over a year and a half. I joined after having spent about 13 years at HP, Hewlett-Packard, and a company called Micro Focus. I had previously been in the DevOps and applications and operations space on the IT side of the house. And Five9, we're in a different side of the house. We are on the customer experience side. So we're a cloud contact center first. Ultimately, we are a customer engagement platform. So helping our customers connect with their customers when it matters most, when they need help, when they need support, when they want to reach out and have an engagement, whether that be via a phone call, whether it be via a text message or an online chat.
And it's fascinating because you would think that through this pandemic, that the customer experience would have gotten a little better.
Yes, we actually did a survey. We do a survey every year. It's called the Customer Service Index. And it's interesting because you would have thought it would have gotten better. But at the same time, you have to think about value and velocity. So value, you would have expected customer experience to get better. But what a lot of brands were contending with was volume and velocity, the amount of calls, the amount of engagements, interactions coming in, all of those things we used to do physically and go in store to do, we now started to do online. And the contact center, as we say, became the front door to your business. And so balancing those different pieces, value and volume and velocity, has become a bit of a challenge. And I think there's a lot of opportunity still in the world of customer experience to make those engagements even more powerful.
I love it because you're so right. So many people, a lot of the experience they have with a organization is not necessarily when they're purchasing something or when they're working in something. It's when they have a problem and they have to call in.
Exactly.
Or they have to check in.
Or they have to return something, right? That's when, there is a massive opportunity to engage with your customers and be proactive. No one's reaching out to a brand because they're happy. There's very few people that go, oh, I'm just going to send an email today to tell this brand that I really love them. It's normally, no, I've got a problem and I need it fixed.
You're so right. And one of the best, as far as I could tell, and I'm speaking from a novice point of view and from the other side of the box, I recently purchased a computer monitor that when it got here from Amazon, of course, the company shipped it through Amazon. Mm-hmm. When it got here, one of them didn't work. And the return, it went the smoothest I've ever dealt with anything.
And imagine if it would have been a different experience. Imagine if the return would have been painful, if it would have been time consuming, if you couldn't get hold of someone, if you didn't know how to return it, then you would have maybe thought twice about going back to that particular seller. But because the return experience was a good experience, you're not left with that bitter taste in your mouth. You're like, okay, wasn't perfect the first time around, but maybe I'll give them another shot.
Yeah. And the same thing happens even when people go to a restaurant. If the food is adequate and the service is excellent, people will likely go back. If the food is excellent and the service is horrible, they probably will not.
100%. So that's what we help our customers do. We help our customers engage with their customers and get more opportunities to create loyalty, to create that brand experience that really represents what you talk about, that really represents their culture, and make sure that that's coming forward into their brand interactions.
So that brings me to the point, why has the company culture catapulted, I'm going to use the word catapulted here, to be to the top as far as brand recognition, brand reputation? I mean, I know Southwest Airlines has said for decades, our number one customer is not our customer, our number one customer is our employee. And that's so true. But it's all about the culture that they have. Why has that culture catapulted to the top in the last 5 years, even prior to the pandemic, it was even growing?
Well, I think there's a variety of different things that impact it. The first thing is, I think, technology. Technology has come a long way, and it's also a lot harder to differentiate on technology and product than I think it ever has been. So that means you need to look for something else to differentiate. The second is people's expectations and people's value systems are just more at the forefront. Now, that might be a generational thing, that could be a regional thing, but I think people want to buy from, people want to engage with companies who are more than just about profit. Obviously, business is about profit, it's about revenue, it's about getting your customers engaged, but people want more for that. They want to scratch under the surface. And if you take the contact center world, we've seen a correlation between customers who are investing in employee experience having a positive impact on customer experience. It's proven to, if you can, for example, get agents who are working in the contact center, if you can get those attrition rates down, you can get an increase in your customer satisfaction score. Why? Because your agents feel more engaged. They're sharing that with their customers. If they are not feeling good about themselves, if they're not feeling like they have a career, if they're feeling negative, that's going to transfer in how they engage with one another and with your customers too.
And the flip side of that, if they're very engaged and you can feel it, then the customer is going to feel like they're more part of their family.
Exactly. That, but positivity breeds positivity. There's what, when you call in or when you engage, right? Maybe you're engaging via a digital channel. People, we did a survey. People want to get to the resolution quickest. That's number one. I want my resolution as quick as possible. They want people who are informed and know what they're doing, but they also want people who can show empathy, who can have that positive experience with it. No one wants to be having a bad day. No one really wants to be grumpy and miserable when they're engaging with someone. So if you've got someone on the other side who can fix your problem and also be a nice person about it and be positive about the experience, makes it even better.
Yeah, it's my goal is whenever I have contact with somebody, and it's more so over the telephone than in a chat box or an email. But one of my first goals is when the other person answers the phone is to make them smile, because I don't know whether the last person they talked to was a pain in their butt. So I want to come across as being positive to generate that positivity back so that we can have a great experience moving forward.
Yeah, and it's super hard. I mean, being an agent, being someone who manages support, being a customer service representative, whether you're doing that in the real world, whether you're doing that from a contact center, is super, super hard, because sometimes people don't always bring that positivity and they've got that frustration that they just want to unleash. Your monitor wasn't working. That's annoying. You needed that monitor. You're frustrated. You're angry. You're upset. And sometimes you need, the first place that you can unleash that can often be on the customer service representative. Yeah,
exactly. And the way we start to build it and the way we get it is so powerful. So that brings us to the question I've been anxious to get to, and that is employee experience and customer experience, the EX and the CX. There's a direct correlation. There's no doubt about that.
100%.
Okay. And so the culture that we're driving from the CEO, CIO, CFO, CTO, anybody up there in that C-suite, the culture that they're driving has to be lived throughout. From a brand perspective, I'll address two questions here. From a brand perspective, how can organizations get that brand down? And then how can the employees feel like they really mean it? Because there's a lot of times organizations say, this is what we believe. And when you get into real life, it's not there.
Yeah, it's true.
So how do we get those two on the same page? Excuse the expression, ever flying in the same direction?
Yeah, I think it starts with, at the end of the day, your values and your culture and what are going to be your guiding principles. Those it's not a one and done. They're evolving. And I think it starts with, the onboarding of people into your organization. When you are onboarding people, are you just flashing up a slide that says, oh, here's our values, go to, www. and go read our values on the intranet? Or are you actually explaining what they mean, what it means to be a member of this team? What are the do's and don'ts? And then are you also following that through with your reward system? Are you encouraging the right behavior? And I think, honestly, it's when the rubber meets the road is when you have to put it into practice. So looking at your team and saying, hey, are my team members exemplifying these values or are they not? And if they're not, what am I going to do about it as a leader? Am I going to share and show that that's not acceptable and find out a way to rectify that situation. So I think it's everything. You have to look at the entire employee journey. And then the other thing as well is you have to bring those examples to the forefront. Be very transparent with how you share this with your customers. And for us at Five9, we launched a campaign around trust at the beginning of the year, and
ding,
it was
ding, 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 ding,
yeah.
ding, ding, ding.
I've
got to make a noise here every time
Yeah.
a guest brings up the word trust, because that comes up almost in every episode. So
It does, because it's to me, it's trust, it's transparency, it's honesty, it's accountability. And why did we launch a trust campaign? Well, because you can't say to someone, trust me, right? You have to prove it. You have to prove it. You have to earn it. You have to earn it every single day. And so with our trust campaign, it was about providing the proof points to say, don't listen to us, listen to our customers. Here's what they say about us, and here sometimes things go well, sometimes they don't. And I think you have to have that level of honesty as well to be able to share that, hey, we're not perfect. No one's perfect, but we have the right attitude to get it right.
Right. And I use the term customer recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever something goes wrong, and it will go wrong, it's how quickly and how effectively do they recover?
Exactly. Are you responsive? Are you personalized? Are you informed? Does someone have to wait 2 days for you to reply to an email, right? Does someone have to spend 10 minutes on hold, or do you offer a callback service so that they don't have to waste their time being on hold? Do you offer chat in case somebody can't call? It's all of these different things that you have to think about. And yeah, I think being responsive, and it's as much about how you respond, not how you react, but how you respond.
There's
that I
a
think
huge
is important.
difference in that. How do you define, let me get your opinion, I'll share mine. How do you define the difference between reacting and responding?
To me, responding is thoughtful. Reaction is just something happened, I immediately have to do something else. It's a very visceral response. Responding to someone is you've put thought, you've put effort into it, you're thinking a few steps ahead. You're not just thinking about the here and now.
Yeah. And the way I look at it is kind of like if you were sick and the doctor gives you medicine and your body has a problem and you go back to the doctor and you're worse, the doctor says your body is having a reaction to the medication. Whereas if you are feeling better, he says your body is responding to the medication. So responding is a much more positive approach and a reaction is a much more negative approach.
Yeah, definitely. Sure. And then no one wants to be reacted to. You want a thoughtful, thought out response, especially when it comes to customer service.
Yes. So where does social media fall into all of this? Because I know that when I have problems today, if I'm not getting a result the way that I want, my next line of offense is going to Twitter and blasting them.
Yeah. And you know what? I think it's an incredibly powerful tool. But at the same time, and it's something that you have to manage, right? As a brand today, you have to manage it. You have to have a thoughtful approach to how you're going to monitor your social media feed. And what are you going to do when you want to respond? There's no point in getting into reacting, right? Getting into these shouting matches, but being aware, responding to it, dealing with it, taking that into maybe another channel and saying, hey, let me reach out to that customer and let me send them a DM. Let me, give them a link to where maybe I can chat with them. Let me try and figure it out. So I think social is an incredibly powerful tool for a consumer because it allows you to have a better voice. And as a brand, you have to manage it, you have to monitor it, and you have to take it just as seriously as all the other channels out there, because perception is reality, and social media helps frame people's perception of your brand.
Yeah, I've used the term lately, perception is more important than reality.
Yeah. I agree with you, Greg. It's so true, and unfortunately, there's a lot of brands out there who just they underestimate that.
Yeah. So let's talk about something else that's in the same avenue, but it's something that has been concerning to me on a personal level. When I'm looking at working with an organization, I'm jumping online, looking at things, and from a personal level, more so than a B2B business. I'm going to look and see, okay, what are the reviews like? There are organizations that are paying for positive reviews.
Yeah.
And I've heard there are organizations that will pay to put negative reviews on the competitors. How do you, as a brand, try to control that?
It's hard. You can't. And it's very true. I've had it happen at organizations that I've worked at where people have put out negative reviews. I think this comes down to your approach. So there's two sides to it. There's how do you deal with it when it happens to you, right? So as a brand, when someone does it to you, how do you respond? Do you respond in kind, or do you go back to your values and say, well, what's important? That's not how we do business. So therefore, I'm going to stay away from that FUD and that mess. I'm going to focus on what matters, which is our customers. The second side to it is, I think as a consumer, that's why, and we're very fortunate as consumers, we have so many sources of data and information that we need to make sure we get an informed choice. And I think, honestly, it can be quite easy to see through some of those things. So I always, when I look for things as a consumer, I'll get a bigger sample set, right? Hey, what does it say on Amazon? What does it also say on Yelp? What does it say if I just randomly put it into Google? So I think you've got to be, as a consumer, you've got to have that extra layer of diligence. Yeah.
So a lot of times I look at it and I follow the old scoring system for the Olympic figure skating.
Okay.
You have a 5 point. I throw out the highs and throw out the lows. I only look at the ones in the middle.
Yeah, that's fair. That's it. It's a good approach to it. But it does happen, and I think this is where most of the time savvy consumers, whether it's especially in B2B, they can see through that. Yeah. And that's why you've got to stand by, and you've got to make sure that again, go back to hiring. When you're hiring people who represent your brand, and that's everyone in your company, doesn't matter who you are, everyone's representing your brand. They follow the same values that you believe are going to be important for employees and for customers.
So let's talk about, as a leader, not necessarily the C-suite, not even the senior vice presidents, but let's get down to the front line, the leaders. When they're interviewing and they're hiring people, and we've all done this at one point. We've hired somebody, found out the person we hired was an evil twin. It has happened. What do we do to really drive home that brand? So let's assume that the C-suite hired the next level, worked at the next level, brought them up. So that's all there. So now we're at the front line. How do we encourage, how do we build? What can a leader do to make sure that they've got that culture that's being generated and revered throughout the organization?
Yeah, I think there's two sides again to it. Oh, maybe I'm on my two-side rant today. So on the one side of the house, I think, you as a leader, you have to understand, I think too many leaders don't take the time themselves to understand truly what the company brand is and what the company culture is and why it matters. Right. So I think the why is really important. Understand as a leader why it matters, because then you can lead by example with your team, and you can better identify the people who are going to be the culture carriers and the people who maybe just need a little bit more help understanding how they can fit into the culture. Because like I said at the beginning, culture, I think it is a bit of an evolving thing. Values are an evolving thing that you can learn and mold over time. The second piece to it is, if you have that scenario, and I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who've been there, I've been there, where you've hired someone and then it's their, it's their twin who maybe has a slightly different personality. I think you have to be quick as a leader to recognize that and give things a chance to change. And if they don't, take the appropriate action. because sometimes that can be a really negative impact when you see people in the organization who are just not aligned. It's not that they're not a good person. It's not that they couldn't be a good fit in another team or in another role, but they're not fit for the space that you have them in. It's more harmful to keep them there.
Yeah. I had that same thing happen, and we're talking 30 years ago in the mortgage world. I had a situation just like that. Great person, just was in the wrong seat on the bus.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard as a leader to have that conversation, and it doesn't matter how many times you have it. It's always hard, and it's always difficult, but that's where, you've got to focus on what's for the best of that individual and for the team as well.
Right. And what was fascinating was, as he moved, it was tough. And then as he started to thrive in that other role that I knew he would be better in, it was like, he was happy. I was happy. The team, everybody was happy. There was just that little moment, that flux moment. We weren't sure how it was going to go.
Yeah. And it's tough, but I think understanding the why of the culture you're trying to create and why it matters, and then personalizing it, really important.
Yeah. So we had a guest on our podcast very, very early on in our history, and he's the CEO of a small IT company outside of Washington, D.C. And they have their 5 core values, and they have not changed in the 28 years he's been running the business. And they use those as their decision factor. And he has had to terminate people when they don't follow those values. Terminating somebody for that is a hard thing. But my question is, how do you hire for that? What are things that you look for in the hiring process for somebody who's going to fit whatever your core values are? Because let's face it, just because they're your core values don't necessarily mean they're my core values.
Yeah.
And I get that. So my company may be different. So what do you look for?
I think you have to ask for examples, and that's why understanding what the values really mean makes a difference as a leader. Because, if you really understand them and you know the why behind them, then you can start to ask questions that allow you to get examples of how people might react. And I think there's also a difference between values and personality. Often as leaders, when we're doing interview processes, it's very easy to mistake a personality match with a values match. And I think you have to ask the right questions, you have to ask for examples, but you also have to put aside, hey, is it easy for me to talk to this person? Is it easy for me? Are we vibing on the same thing? Can they really give me examples of these values and how they would handle situations, right? I think role playing, that is always a great way. Scenario run-throughs, another great way, because it allows you to understand how would people react to or respond to a particular situation.
Okay. So let's get to the other part of my question. The employee experience. We know there's a direct correlation between the employee experience and the customer experience. How do you measure? 2, how do you set up for that? How can you get people engaged more so that they feel happy? So let's just talk about, what do you do in your organization? What have you done as a leader that has really engaged that employee experience? Because we know the correlation is definitely there. So let's talk about, how do we get it there?
Yeah, so I think how we get it there is, I think you have to set up a complete ecosystem that frames that employee experience. So that ecosystem means that you have to have continual feedback. So we do quarterly engagement surveys, but at the same time, I also try to spend time doing skip levels. Now, I don't put it on the calendar as this is a skip level meeting. I'll just maybe randomly pop in, right, and say, hey, have you got 5 minutes? Hey, can we chat about something? Right? Hey, how are you doing? So I think you've got to have the formal things like the quarterly surveys where you can get the quantitative data and the qualitative data, and people can do that in an anonymous way where sometimes people feel a little bit better to, maybe be a bit more honest, maybe share some of the negatives as well as the positives. But then I think you also have to have those informal engagements across your team as well to sort of pulse how are things going. And if you feel things as a leader in your gut that is maybe not right in an organization, just testing them with different people within your team and outside of your team as well. So that's two of the things that I like to do. And then separately, like I've set up for my team, I have a program called the Marketing All-Stars program. It's a program that we run within our group, essentially every quarter, throughout the year. Individuals from within marketing can nominate each other. They can nominate a peer, they can nominate a team member, they can nominate a manager. And basically the nomination criteria is all about how have they exemplified the right values and behaviors that we want to encourage in the team. So whether that's using data in a constructive way, whether that's teaming together. So all different criteria that people can recognize for each other. And then when we have our all hands call, we celebrate those team members who have both been nominated and those who are winners per se. And we celebrate those team members in those categories of looking at customer satisfaction, over internal focus, having a bias for execution, orchestrating big bets, being data driven, and having engagement and transparency over posturing.
Okay. So how often do you do these recognition meetings?
So we have a all hands every month, and we pick winners once a quarter, so every 3 months. And then what we try and do is we have a team Slack channel, and we try and put in there the following sort of quarter. So if we recognize at the end of the quarter, the following quarter, we'll share the reasons why people were maybe nominated. Mm-hmm. So everybody gets that opportunity to see what the others have thought. And at the beginning, I used to announce the winners. But what I thought, well, why should I do it? Why not have the team member who has nominated the winner, have them share their point of view? And so now at your hands, wherever we can, I try to get the nominator to talk about the winner in their own words.
It's so interesting because is this something that you have done since the pandemic, or is this something you've been doing even for years before?
No, I've been doing it for years before. Before.
Has it changed with the pandemic?
You know what? I think it has changed with the pandemic. I think to me, it's even more important because when you don't have the ability to physically connect, it's it's harder. Sounds obvious. It's harder to disconnect. It's hard. It's easier to disconnect. It's easier to just turn off the Zoom call and be like, oh yeah, who cares, right? And when you're in a co-located environment, you see someone, oh yeah, hey, great job, nice job, right? Do you always do that on Slack or whatever your messaging app tends to be? Right. Not always. So I think for me, I've tried to put more emphasis on it as we've come through the pandemic, and also doing things like we have something called Whiskey Wednesdays. It was a program that started at 5-9 before. I kind
of like this one. Go ahead.
I joined, right? But it's a tradition that I've carried the torch for, if you will. And the team have done everything on Whiskey Wednesdays. It's just an hour on a Wednesday where the team get together informally. Sometimes 10 people join, sometimes 20, sometimes 30. Sometimes all the team, and we do desk-a-size. We've done whiskey tastings, chocolate tastings, art classes, cookie decorating, terrarium building, just a whole series of giving people an opportunity to connect on a more personal level.
Right. One of the things I have said for the last 18 to 24 months, or maybe a little more, is that the challenges facing leaders today are really no different than they were pre-pandemic. They're just emphasized more.
Exactly. The pandemic has just amplified it. It's amplified the need for more focus on employee engagements. And also as well, I think the pandemic gave people an opportunity to say, well, I'm not going to stand for, employee experience not being a priority. I'm not going to stand for poor work-life integration. I'm not going to stand to just be a number. So I think it's great that employees are, thinking about that. There was a term I saw the other day. What was it called? It was blind quitting, I think it was. Quiet quitting.
Yes.
Yeah, and I was like, wow,
I heard that same thing. Yes.
Yeah, phenomenal, right? The notion that people are just sort of, they're not quitting their jobs, but they're not going above and beyond. They're just doing the bare minimum, right?
They're now moving from actively engaged to disengaged, which is one step away from actively disengaged.
Yeah. And it's super hard. As a leader, it is super hard. And it's something that I think you've got to watch out for. And part of it is people are burnt out and they need that time.
So what do you recommend to leaders if they've recognized somebody has moved back to just disengaged and they were engaged?
Ask why. I think you've got to recognize it. I think you've got to have a very upfront conversation and ask why.
But I might look at you and go, no, I'm not. I'm just having a bad day, bad week.
Yeah, I think that's where, that could be part of it. I think you also have to think about as a leader, well, how are you measuring engagement? And how are you measuring engagement, not just by your own barometer, but that you share with the rest of the team so that, whether it's a metric, whether it's about, are people attending meetings? Are they being vocal in meetings? You have to be transparent with that. And sort of then you've got that ability to have a conversation to say, hey, all right, fine, you're having a bad week, but I've noticed that you're not speaking up in meetings anymore. I've noticed that you're, I asked you to get involved in this project and you just didn't reply or you said no. It's those difficult conversations as leaders, more and more, they're happening every day. And I think they have to happen.
And that's sounding a lot like a parent dealing with a teenager too.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. I'm a mother of two younger children. But yeah, I think, sometimes people are just having a bad week and they need a break, but they need the time to know that having a break is okay.
Yeah. And being able to be open and upfront about when something's not right.
Yes. Very much so. Very much so.
It's got to have that open feeling. And I think that's something that's missing today because we're not having that connectivity. We're not having those water cooler moments. We're not having the chance to come in and coffee and donuts and bagels and all kinds of food in the morning and things like that.
Yeah, and I think you can still create that in a virtual environment, but you have to be purposeful and you have to be intentional about it. Yeah. And I think right now we live in a world where maybe we are we're still in that limbo state. Or maybe we'll come back into the office, maybe we won't, maybe people will be remote, we'll be hybrid. Well, have you really thought about what a hybrid experience feels like for people? Have you taken that time to go through that journey for your employees? And
what
really
hybrid is for one person, one company, may be a different hybrid for a different company.
Exactly. Gone are the days that, you can go, well, that's industry best practice. Let me follow that. No, we want to be personalized in our communications. People want to be personalized in their employee experience as well.
Yeah. So let's talk for a moment as we get ready, because we've been online for a little over 30 minutes already. And something I'm anxious to learn what it means. And that's the intersection of technology and sociology. That's where your PhD is.
Yes.
Explain to everybody what is, I understand technology, I understand sociology. How do they intersect? Are they intersecting like this?
No,
it's intersecting like this.
It's how you can use one to strengthen the other. So basically what I looked at as part of my PhD, as part of my research, was consumer adoption of new technology and what were the factors that impacted people's positive or negative adoption of that technology. And at the time, it was based on airline check-in and self-service check-in kiosks, which are a norm today, but they never used to be.
Right.
And so where you look at sociology and psychology, you can look at what are the things that create that psychological safety for a consumer, as an example. We talk about it in employee context as well, that will make them more or less likely to adopt a technology. And there are 4 factors. It's relative advantage. So will this technology give me an advantage in my life? And how and what is that? Making that clear. It's effort expectancy. Is this going to be easier for me, or is it going to be harder than what what my baseline is? It's facilitating conditions. Do I have the necessary physical attributes or software to be able to use this new technology? And then the final one is social influence. Are important others doing this, purchasing this, being involved in this? Is this something that is going to improve my social status or social being? Like it or not, you can say, oh, I don't care what other people think. Most people care what people think. They might not always vocalize it. They may deal with it internally, but in some way, shape or form, that impacts our desire to either go down a path or take a different path.
Right.
And so it's really how you can leverage sociology and psychological principles to better steer technology adoption.
Fascinating. As you're telling me this, I'm thinking about several areas. Okay. I'm thinking about online banking, mobile banking, the features there. And I have several friends of mine who are vehemently against it. And I have several that are, oh my God, I'm all in.
Yeah.
So I'm watching that, in that direction.
And think about those 4 factors, right? So, it's like, so one of the examples in the self-service kiosks was when self-service kiosks were first introduced, you needed to use your credit card to identify yourself, right? That's a facilitating condition. Did people always have their credit card with them? They thought that maybe, oh, I'm going to put my credit card in, it's going to charge me again, or it's going to charge me for something extra. I don't want to do that. Then it's like, okay, well, we'll move to passports because people will be traveling with a passport. Well, if you are in Europe, sure, but in North America, maybe not. You can travel with a driver's license in the United States, at least. So, facilitating conditions can take many different forms. And when you think you've solved for one piece, something else comes up and you have to think through all of those different scenarios.
That brings me to the brand experience of how do they get people more engaged in that and getting people to want to do that. That's your job as in Five9 in one aspect is as the CMO.
Yeah.
How do organizations, what do they look at when they're trying to get customers to buy into their product and employees to buy into their product? Because that's coming from the top in leadership now.
Yeah, I think you have to make it relatable and you have to show that. Go back to performance, relative advantage and effort expectancy. You have to show that your product, that your solution is going to make that other person's life better. It's going to make their business better. It's going to make their persona better, their career better, their personal self better. That's what you have to focus on, the value that you are providing to someone else, the value that you're providing to your employees, making their life better.
It's interesting because, again, I'm thinking as you're saying that what goes back in my mind is into the even 1980s or 90s, how McDonald's would do TV commercials. And it was not about selling a McMuffin or a sandwich in the morning, because it was always about, oh, I got to call mom. And it was about making them feel better. So I got to go to McDonald's so I can call my mother. And it's just, is that manipulation or is that?
You could say it is, right? You could say it is because it's about outcomes and it's about value, but that's where you have to, again, build that trust and that sincerity and that transparency. And so, you know what, when something goes wrong and an outcome doesn't happen, you have to be honest about that as well. And that will help to make it more sincere and more genuine. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's what are marketers trying to do? Marketers are trying to get you to part with your money. They're trying to get you, what are brands trying to do? Brands aren't, for the most part, outside of non-profits and others, for the most part, what are they trying to do? They're trying to get you to part with your money. But that's the difference, is that I think now companies are realizing they should also be focused on trying to make the life of the consumer and their employees better.
Wow. Let's end it right there, because I think what you just said is powerful. They need to worry about making the lives of their consumers and their employees better.
Yeah.
And when we do that all the way across the board, we're going to get employees engaged. And when we have employees engaged, we know it's just a proven fact that they're going to be more engaged with their customers.
Exactly. What are you doing for someone else? That's how you have to think about it.
That is fascinating. Genefa, thank you so much for your time today. I have to ask this one question. You're in San Francisco, but you're obviously not from San Francisco.
No. No. UK, born and bred. So yeah, but that's but I migrated over here, and now I'm a Californian, but I'm not a Californian native. I'm a UK person. So I see the different side of how different cultures also engage in consumer experience, and that can be very different. That's something that people should think about as well. Who are their consumers, and what does their culture look like?
Fascinating. Genefa, this has been absolutely enjoyable. I hope the listeners have really enjoyed what we've talked about here today. If people need to reach out and find you, how's a good way to do that?
You can reach out on LinkedIn, Genefa Murphy, or you can reach out on Twitter at Genefa Murphy. And I'm normally pretty responsive. If you just send me a random LinkedIn request, I'll be a little bit skeptical. But if you personalize it, then I'm going to be more likely to reply.
Yes. So tell them you listen to your podcast on the Teamwork Advantage, and that'll do it.
Exactly.
All right, Genefa, thank you so much for your time today. Folks, once a week on the Teamwork Advantage, we share skills, and Genefa has definitely shared some skills that you can act on immediately in your organization, in your families, with your kids. Doesn't matter. Until next week, remember, having a good day is just being average. When you listen to the Teamwork Advantage and follow through on the ideas that people have shared with you here, we know you're not average. So go make today and every day an excellent and exceptional day. Till next week, take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Teamwork Advantage with Greg Gregory. Be sure to like, subscribe, and activate the bell icon to be notified of future episodes. To learn more about how Greg can help your organization develop a powerful winning culture, visit TeamsRock.com. That's TeamsRock.com.